heart, you have broken it. And in breaking it, you've broken mine.
There are adaptations that honor the spirit of a novel, and then there are adaptations that feel like a memory of the novel. Watching Fennell's version of Wuthering Heights, I didn't feel like I was revisiting Emily Brontë's only novel. I felt like I was stepping inside someone's emotional afterimage of it. Not the text itself, but the sensation it once left behind. And that distinction matters. Before we begin, would you please support me? Subscribing is free and very important to me. Please subscribe for better analysis and more videos. Fennell has openly framed her film as a fast and loose interpretation rather than a faithful recreation. Even the way the title is presented suggests a wink to the audience, almost as if she's saying, "This isn't the book you studied in school. This is what it felt like to me." From the very first frame, the film prioritizes sensation over structure. Linus Sandgren's cinematography leans hard into texture. Fingernails scraping velvet wallpaper, the imprint of lashes against a sweaty back, broken egg yolks bleeding into white sheets, melted chocolate gliding across skin, thick fog swallowing the Yorkshire moors. Everything is tactile. Everything is heightened. The color palette refuses subtlety. Neon pinks, violent reds, sequins, gloss. Kathy, played by Margot Robbie, wears outfits that feel intentionally anachronistic once she marries into wealth. Cat-eye sunglasses straight out of the 1960s. Candy-coated glamour layered over gothic despair. It's bold, it's artificial, it's deliberate, but boldness alone doesn't guarantee depth. One of the most controversial aspects of this adaptation is its approach to race. In Brontë's novel, Heathcliff's racial identity is central to the cruelty he experiences. The language used in the original text is complicated and uncomfortable, but it is also foundational to the novel's themes of exclusion and prejudice. Here, that complexity is largely removed. Heathcliff is played by Jacob Elordi, and the tension shifts away from racial othering towards something more aesthetic and romanticized. Supporting actors like Hong Shou and Shazad Latif appear in roles that feel peripheral rather than transformative. That shift fundamentally changes the story's emotional architecture, because in the novel, the tragedy is deeply rooted in external forces: class, race, jealousy, social rigidity. In this film, those pressures feel muted, and what replaces them is something more internal: repression, desire, impulse. The opening scene signals that this will not be a conventional period drama. There's public execution, sexual undertones, moral decay. It flirts with shock value in ways that feel aligned with Fennell's previous films like Promising Young Woman and Saltburn. But here, the provocation doesn't fully escalate. There's a moment where a man's death becomes a spectacle. Applause echoes as he hangs. His body reacts in a way that unsettles the crowd. It feels like Fennell is daring the audience to recoil. But the film doesn't push far enough to make that discomfort transformative. It lingers, then moves on. And that's where the adaptation begins to feel oddly restrained despite its explicit imagery. The Earnshaw household is introduced as a space of respectable decay. Financial strain is constant. Denial is habitual. Mr. Earnshaw drifts between fatherhood and drunken absence. Kathy grows up in this environment, half wild, half neglected. When Earnshaw brings home a young boy he rescues from an abusive parent, Kathy immediately claims him. She names him Heathcliff. That choice is significant. In the novel, Heathcliff's naming and social position emphasize his outsider status. Here, giving Kathy the power to name him reframes their dynamic. It suggests destiny, but it also erases certain power imbalances that originally defined their bond. As children, Kathy and Heathcliff's relationship is convincingly rendered. They run through fields. They laugh. They endure punishment together. There's tenderness and codependence in equal measure. But as they age, the emotional stakes blur. Two major changes stand out. Kathy's brother Hindley is reduced to a distant memory rather than an active antagonist, and Heathcliff's marginalization feels aesthetic rather than systemic. Without Hindley's persistent cruelty and without a clear external hierarchy pressing down on Heathcliff, his later bitterness feels unmoored. His cruelty lacks a clear origin. And when you cast a conventionally attractive white actor in the role, the question of social exclusion becomes harder to sell. The supposed inequality between Kathy and Heathcliff becomes abstract rather than visible. Margot Robbie, meanwhile, faces a different challenge. Kathy is canonically a teenager for much of the story. Robbie brings intensity, but not innocence. She never quite convinces as someone naive or socially unaware. She does, however, convincingly portray ambition. When Kathy encounters the wealthy Linton family, the shift is immediate. The contrast between scarcity and abundance is visually amplified. Plastic, gloss, artificial brightness. Class difference is communicated through production design rather than dialogue. Edgar Linton, played by Shazad Latif, is softened to the point of passivity. He rarely feels like a real obstacle, which means when Kathy chooses him over Heathcliff, the decision feels less tragic and more impulsive. In the novel, Kathy's torment stems from the understanding that marrying Heathcliff would invite social disgrace rooted in race and class. Here, the motivation narrows. Money, comfort, escape. It becomes a personal failure rather than a societal one. And that shift has consequences, because when external oppression fades into the background, the love story is left to stand on its own. And stripped of context, it risks looking like pure lust. There is chemistry between Robbie and Elordi. It's visible, it's physical, but it rarely feels dangerous. It rarely feels catastrophic. The storm that defines Wuthering Heights in literary history is replaced by something more polished, more curated. Even the musical choices underline this tension. Modern tracks, including original songs by Charlie X, play over montages of Kathy wandering through jewel-toned rooms. One track openly declares a refusal to feel imprisoned. The metaphor is not subtle, and that lack of subtlety becomes one of the film's defining traits. This is not a failure of fidelity. No filmmaker is obligated to replicate a novel word for word. The issue is coherence. When you strip away the structural forces that shaped the original tragedy, you must replace them with something equally powerful. Here, the replacement is aesthetic intensity, but aesthetics cannot carry tragedy alone. By the time the film reaches its final act, I wasn't questioning whether Kathy and Heathcliff would destroy each other. I was questioning whether the destruction meant anything beyond impulse. The original novel is devastating because it exposes how society crushes individuals. This adaptation reframes that devastation as personal dysfunction, and that's a very different story. Wuthering Heights will hit theaters on February 13, 2026, and I have no doubt it will spark debate about adaptation, about casting, about artistic freedom. But debate alone doesn't guarantee resonance. If a love story is reduced to texture, color, and chemistry without consequence, it may burn bright for a moment. But like anything built only on sensation, it eventually fades. And that might be the most unexpected tragedy of all. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments. This is where these kinds of films come to life. Until the next story, stay curious, be critical, keep your eyes on the screen, and remember, every film you haven't seen is a new film.